All right, let's on. So, like what some of you shared, you were worried, yeah, anxious, and yes, Glenda's parent Glenda also mentioned that whether are they well prepared to sit for the exams in an exam environment. So these are real concerns, and we do share your concerns as well. In terms of your apprehension that your child might miss out on key learning milestones without graded assessments, and like what some of you mentioned, without marks, how would I know if my child is learning well and keeping up? So the most important thing is that what we want to share with you is the attitude that can be formed. Does your child have the desire to go on learning? It's not so much of getting the how many marks being the top few, but the attitude to want to learn, to be curious about things around her. So in this sharing, we would like to share with you some strategies that we use in class to keep our students' learning in check and to build them to be confident and self-directed learners. So without formal exams for primary 1 and 2, what happens is students will definitely have more time and opportunities to communicate maths ideas with their friends, with their teachers, and gain more independence in their day-to-day lives, right? Because if we have a lot of tests and exams going on, you find that your child will be very stressed, she'll be taking time, or you will be taking time to make sure she sits down and revise for her exams, and then she will miss out on learning experiences or opportunities to see maths in a more relevant and more engaging way. And we also, without the exams, they will also have more time to build skills and knowledge needed and to practice and fine-tune these skills. Example, communication skills, social skills. They are practicing on their maths concepts, which I will elaborate in the next few slides. So what are our goals for our students? In our school, education should be an active and constructive process. This means that children take an active role in constructing their own knowledge through manipulating concrete items, having class discussions, having the opportunities to work in groups, to co-build meaning and knowledge for themselves. And education should not only involve children and teachers, but it involves you, parents. You are equally important in educating your child, not just in her learning, but also in her learning disposition. How does she take failure? Is she resilient? Does she ask questions? So these are important values and attitudes that we want to build, and we hope that you will also partner us in building the disposition. Education should also allow for young children to embrace the joy of learning without the pressure of having to perform well in exams. Ultimately, what we want, and I'm sure it's also what you want, is for our students to become confident and self-directed. So here is an overview of the primary mathematics curriculum. And this comes from MOE, and the curriculum is used nationwide. So whichever school you go to, or even on the MOE website, you will see this. And at the heart and the central focus of this mathematics curriculum is the development of mathematical problem-solving competency. And there are 5 pillars that are essential in developing our students' mathematical problem-solving skills. So the 5 pillars are metacognition, processes, concepts, skills, and attitudes. So metacognition is about thinking about the thinking and the ability to control one thinking process, and also being able to select and use the problem-solving strategies. And not only that, it's important for your child to be able to monitor and regulate her own thought process, especially when she's engaging in solving a non-routine or open-ended problem. Now, for processes, what are the competencies involved? Is she able to communicate her maths ideas, apply what she has learned, and also do modeling? For concepts, understanding the properties, how are they related? One topic is related to another. For example, fractions is related to decimals and percentage and vice versa. And these are important concepts that she needs to be grounded in so that it helps her build her numeracy skills as she moves from one level to the next. And in terms of skills, does she have the proficiency to carry out operations? Does she can she handle algorithms like the working column? Can she visualize the shapes in different orientation? Can she handle data and use mathematical tools like the weighing scales, ruler, and even her model drawing ruler? And last but not least, attitudes. Now, you notice that sometimes at the lower primary, the girls love maths. Yes, they love maths. But when they reach upper primary, some of them are afraid of mathematics because they do not sense the success. And what is maths all about? It's not only about being successful in problem solving, but it is about them having the confidence and the interest, and most importantly, the resilience, and to be able to persevere even when they come across questions that challenge them. So we want to build the attitudes in maths problem solving. Now, the primary math curriculum adopts a spiral approach. Notice that the basic topics such as whole numbers, measurement, geometry, and data analysis, these are taught from P1 all the way to P6, with fractions introduced at P2. So as the students move from one level to the next, the topics are interrelated. So you see at P2, fractions is being taught and introduced, and subsequently at P4, decimals come in, and then percentage ratio, so on and so forth. And all these topics are interrelated. So then, if students are not well-grounded in numeracy in the lower and middle primary, there will be a big learning gap as they move from one level to the next. So then, how does the school help students build their numeracy skills? Yes, we have assessments in place. So assessments allows both teacher and student to monitor progress towards achieving learning objectives and can be approached in a variety of ways. There are two types of assessments, summative and formative. And for summative, we call it also assessment of learning, whereas for formative, it's assessment for learning. Now, an example of summative assessment would be like the termly weighted assessments from P3 onwards, and also the end of year exams for P3 to P5. The summative assessments evaluate student learning, knowledge, and proficiency at the end of the unit or chapter, or even at the end of a term or end of the year or mid-year. They are often graded and weighted. And we are not saying that summative assessments are bad, but they are critical tools that give us information about teaching and learning to our students and to you. And it also provides important information about standards of performance. And at the end, students' learning and academic achievements are evaluated. So basically, it gives us an indication of where a child is at and her standard of performance. Now, for formative assessments, they refer to the tools that identify misconceptions, struggles, and learning gaps along the way. So they are effective tools for helping to shape learning and can even train students' abilities to take ownership of their learning when they understand that the goal is to improve learning, not about the final marks. And it does include students assessing themselves or their peers through quizzes, conversations, which links us back to the curriculum framework reasoning. In short, formative assessment occurs throughout a class or course and seeks to improve student achievement of learning objectives through approaches that can support specific students' needs. And the formative assessments also give children the ability to actively manage and adjust their own learning, as well as tracking their own learning goals. Not only that, it provides us, educators, with a good amount of time to give feedback to children regularly and allow children to have their own input in their learning, which builds their confidence. Formative assessments are important. Why? Because they act as checkpoints along the way to check on our students' understanding. Earlier, I mentioned that the math curriculum is a spiral approach and topics are interrelated. Hence, it is essential to have formative assessments to ensure that learning takes place and learning gaps are closed, and not wait till the end of the year or end of mid-year before we start to see that there are learning gaps. So now I will hand you over to Madam Rania, who will share with you more examples of formative assessment strategies that we use in the classroom. Madam Rania, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Goh, for bringing us through the whole math curriculum and also for sharing the various types of assessments that we have. So have you ever wondered what exactly happens in your daughter's classrooms during math lessons? Now, I'm happy to share that these 6 are some of the strategies that we have in our classrooms, and they are namely the formative assessment strategies, which Mrs. Goh have clearly explained to us. We also have self and peer assessment using traffic lights, solo, journaling, the progress feedback, as well as something that you've probably heard before, KOOBITS. Okay, now what you see here is actually a photograph of our students holding up colored cards, specifically colors of the traffic lights. Okay, these cards are actually part of the formative assessment student tool, or in short known as the FAST kit. Okay, these cards can actually be found in their student organizers right at the back of them. Okay, so there are 3 colors altogether. And what is it that we use it for in our classrooms? So basically, this could be a scene of when a teacher has explained a problem and ask students to actually show their level of understanding. Okay, it could also be an instance where it is at the start of the topic where a teacher wants to get to know or get the students to assess her prior knowledge on that topic. Okay. So of course, the colors would stand for green is if she understands totally. And then yellow or amber is if she has a question or if she's not very sure of what she's listening to, or she's not very sure of what the topic is about. And red is actually if she totally does not understand or she has a question that she has to ask urgently. Okay, so if you notice, given this opportunity, students are actually very engaged and every single one of them is encouraged to participate in this assessment of her own learning. Okay, so when we involve the students in their learning process, as opposed to them just sitting down and receiving passive information, okay, this actually encourages her to think about her own learning. And if I could remind you of the mathematics framework where metacognition and attitude is also important. Okay, so if at a young age we are able to train our girls to think about what they know and inculcate this habit of constantly checking their understanding, it will actually help them in a very long way, okay, in their education. All right. Along with the colored traffic light cards, there are also the A, B, C, D, and 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. Likewise, math teachers can actually pose questions on the screen. Again, it could be one where the topic has not been taught yet, or at the end of a topic or a subtopic. Okay, and students are actually required to select their options and collectively show their answers. Okay, so not only do students again get to assess their understanding, it is also immediate feedback for me as a classroom teacher, and it gives me a chance to follow up with students as to why is it that they chose what they have chosen, the choice that they have chosen. Okay, it allows me to have conversations with my students. At the same time, it allows the students the voice, okay, and ultimately that actually builds her confidence. Okay, so this as compared to giving a quiz all the time, okay, would require some time for me to mark and then give her the feedback. But what you see now is something that is of immediate feedback. Okay, misconceptions can actually be addressed on the spot, and it also signals to me as a teacher where I can go forward or how I can actually move forward in my lessons. All right. At the same time, if you look at the students here, everyone is actually participating, and that is because we are creating a safe and non-threatening environment where our little learners are actually encouraged to participate. Okay, on top of the traffic light cards and the ABCD 1, 2, 3, 4 cards, we also make use of mini whiteboards. And this is actually part and parcel of the learning of math in our classrooms. Okay, so similarly, students show their answers. And just to share, the little ones are actually very thrilled when we tell them to take their whiteboards out. Okay, so this is because it is not daunting for them. There is no pressure on them, and they are actually allowed to write their own answers, and that gives the girls a chance to be confident, to be self-directed. Okay, apart from the FA strategies, we also make use of traffic lights as well. So what you see earlier was actually the traffic light cards in their organizers. Now we also do self and peer assessment using traffic lights, but this is actually based on their written assignments. So not only do we get them to check understanding of what has been taught, we also get them to check their understanding of what they have done on their written work. Okay, similarly, the 3 colors are used, and they also do likewise with their peers' work. So in this whole process, students actually self-assess and reflect. So there's a lot of reflection that goes along. There's a lot of self-assessment that is carried out in the classrooms. Now you might be thinking, at P1 and P2, are they able to do that? Are they not too young to be doing this? But that is precisely the whole point, where we actually want to start them at this lower level so that we inculcate this habit. And as they progress upward to middle and to upper, the correct attitudes and skill set is already in place. Okay. All right. So when teachers actually receive these colors as feedback, it gives me a chance to feed forward. So if I were to see a majority of my students showing me red or yellow, then that is actually signal for me that, hey, is there something about my teaching that has to be altered? Or do I need to reach them out in a different way? Okay. It also gives me a chance to provide specific feedback to my students instead of generalizing all the mistakes at once. Okay. And then conferencing with the child also helps to build rapport. So when they are comfortable and they don't fear math, that is when they enjoy the subject the most. All right. And also, the teachers actually pick out misconceptions, and we address them during our support lessons. So what you see here are actually authentic examples of our students doing self-assessment. And if you notice, the one in the middle has got majority of her questions circled in green, but she also has one in yellow. Okay, but at the end of the marking session, we noticed that she has managed to get the questions correct. So then that gives me an idea if this student is not very confident in her answers, and why is it that she circled yellow. Okay, so it gives me not only her to assess her understanding, it gives me a chance to understand the child as well. Okay, as opposed to everything that we mark wrong, and it can be quite demoralizing for the girls to receive their work with all the crosses in check. So we give them a chance to assess their learning first, to ask any questions if need be. Next is an example of where the students actually carried out a peer assessment. Okay, so what happens in this process or in this exercise is that everyone attempts the questions on their own. After which, okay, they exchange their papers, and their peers actually do a marking exercise on their peers' work. So again, students really enjoy this process, and that's because they get a chance to be teachers. And again, they are very thrilled to be able to go through this process. So again, that is the whole idea, where we want to bring joy in learning. Okay, so after which the peers will do a marking, and they actually paste the colored stickers on the top of their friends' exercise. Again, we have students actually writing encouraging messages to their friends, And also we have peers actually taking a step forward and trying to help their friends explain the whole pedagogy, the whole algorithm of how to carry out the sums. And you'll be surprised that actually when their peers come in the explanation process, that they sometimes learn better because you know, peers at the same age, when they learn from each other, they're actually co-constructing knowledge with each other. So this is one of the process that we have in our math classrooms as well, right? Okay, the next strategy or activity that we have is something called SOLO, and it actually stands for Structure of Observed Learning Outcomes. So I will show you a picture shortly of what a SOLO rubric looks like, but basically SOLO actually allows a systematic way that describes how learners' understanding built from easy to difficult. So the idea here is for students to keep on growing, okay, to keep their learning not to stop at one point, but to consistently improve themselves so that they go on from the next level to the next level. Okay, so then again, it enhances the quality of learning within the classroom, and through that, they develop deep understanding as opposed to superficial understanding of the lessons. Okay, a solo taxonomy rubric actually takes on a 5 hierarchical level of understanding. And if you notice, all the stages actually include the previous stage and it adds something to it. Okay, so this allows our students to reflect meaningfully. Again, it's about reflection, okay, about metacognition, about thinking about their thinking. And it also allows me as a teacher or my colleagues as classroom teachers to design our learning experiences for the girls. Okay, and we also train them to identify success criteria so that they have in mind a goal that they can reach. Okay, also for me to feed forward and feedback on the lessons. And as such, students actually understand what they're doing. They understand the reasons for what they do. Okay, and as mentioned, this results in deep understanding. So this is an example of a solo taxonomy rubric on the topic of multiplication. What happens typically in this cycle is that they take a pre-survey. Okay, so on the left, on part A is actually a pre-survey done by a child. So she has ticked that she doesn't know anything about the 3 times table. All right. And again, you notice in her comments, she said that I can learn from my friends to be great. I think that's what she meant. Okay, so you can gather from here that she's actually in a very safe environment. There's trust in the whole environment, and she's not afraid to learn. She's not even afraid to admit that she doesn't know anything about the 3 times table. All right. And that's how we want to build confidence in our students. So after going through a whole lesson of multiplication, then will they sit for a post survey. So this is actually a sample from the same child who has moved up 2 levels to the 3rd one. Okay, and it's very heartening as classroom teachers to see that, you know, the lesson has gone well, it has been well received, and the child is even more confident after the lesson. Okay, so she has ticked that she knows now all her 3 times table up to 10 times 3. Okay, so again, as opposed to a child sitting in the classroom receiving the lesson from me, not knowing or not having an idea where she's at, where she's currently going, or how much she has grown. Okay, this is something, these strategies allow students to be actively engaged, and it allows them surprisingly to pay more attention because they are involved in the whole process. Okay, we also have journaling in our classrooms where we allow students to articulate their thinking, okay, to use the appropriate math language and to make their thinking visible. All right, so over here, they are to create their own stories and they enjoy doing this. So what you see here is an example of what a primary 1 child has written. Okay, so again, I hear from my colleagues how it's very heartening to hear conversations going on in the classrooms, and then friends encouraging each other and even pointing out errors, but in a very positive light. Okay. So there's also a section on peer assessment. Okay, so when they go through peer assessment, they are also checking their own understanding. Okay, so to be able to look at their friend's response and to check it against their understanding, that's part powerful learning that's going on. So again, you look at the comments there, okay, they give very nice comments. So the whole lesson is actually a positive one. All right, and this actually helps in the long run because when students are confident, when they are self-directed, that's actually half the battle won. All right. All right, so over here, we actually have our progress feedback, and you have probably seen this, your daughter's actually bringing them home. All right, so you notice that the progress feedback has got no marks displayed. So what is on the progress feedback are just learning outcomes of the different topics and 4 levels of competencies. Okay, so at one glance, we are able to tell which subtopic or which topics is it that the girls need more help in, or which are the topics that they are very competent in. All right, so I would like to urge parents as well, when you receive this piece of document, take a look at it. Okay, it provides you an overview of how much your child understands. And if you could zoom into the questions, all right, then you can ascertain if the questions or the errors that were made a conceptual one, or was it something that she wasn't very meticulous in? And that's where we actually dive into correct specifically. Okay, so if you take a look, it's always about improving themselves and how else can they move on to the next level. Now, not be discouraged if you see more ticks in the beginning and developing competencies. What I would like to advise you or encourage you is really to check in with the child. Okay, you know that she has gone through several checkpoints in the classrooms already, and the misconceptions would have probably been corrected, been sieved out. So this is where we come in, we support the child, and we tell the child that, if there are any questions at all, feel free to check in with us. So it is a partnership that's going on. We do not just leave this piece of document aside and then, next topic is being taught and again, there are misconceptions. So as best as possible, we would like to correct it as immediately as we can. Okay, so do take a closer look at this document when the teachers actually return them to you. All right. Now, moving on, we do hear from parents concerns about problem solving. And this is actually the heart of the whole math curriculum. Okay, in the middle, the whole central focus is actually problem solving, which many students are fearful of. Okay, so at OLN, we actually have a framework that cuts across all 6 levels. It is actually the STAR approach. Okay, and math teachers actually make use of this framework a lot. So what is it that STAR stands for? So basically, we get the students to study the question carefully. And when they study the question carefully, it is involving them to sieve out important information of the question in the questions. Okay, so they can circle, they can highlight, then they identify the final question in the problem sum, which actually will guide them in their steps. Right after they have studied the question carefully, then we get them to think. Okay, think back of all the strategies that you have used in class and which one of them are the best to actually help solve the problem. Okay, so at lower primary, we actually have the 4 operations. So we get the girls to match the information that they have sieved out. Okay, for example, each or groups, then that is actually telling that it is either a multiplication or division question. But if they sieve out words like at first or in total, then they can actually narrow it down to an addition or a subtraction question. So these are strategies that have been put in place in the classrooms to help the students tackle the questions. All right. After thinking of the solution, then they apply the skills and strategies, and this requires them to actually write out the math equations. Okay, and it doesn't stop there. We also train them to reflect on their answers. So this is one of the last step is the one that many students forget about. Okay, once they are done, they are very happy. Okay, and when you tell them to check, they say, yes, I checked. Okay, but we also want them to check and reflect on deeper level. Okay, check if there are units that need to be written. Check if there's a transference error. Okay, and if their answers make sense. So if you have written a multiplication equation and your final answer is actually bigger, then that actually doesn't make sense. Okay, so this whole framework is something that students fall back on, and they have that confidence to actually tackle the problems. So if you could speak the same language at home, okay, remind them that, hey, you know, there's actually that STAR approach that your teachers have taught you. Because sometimes these young children, when they see a chunk of words, that's where we lose them. So if we teach them to, you know, dissect the question, to at least start with the first step, to sieve out the information, and then that will actually get them somewhere. Okay. Again, these are authentic examples of how students have managed to apply the STAR approach. And again, in the classrooms, when we have taught them enough, that's where they are very independent to carry out the sieving of the information on their own without having us to remind them. And that is really what we want. So when we receive a piece of worksheet that is clean, that doesn't show that the student has done active learning. We would appreciate it if there are, you know, underlining, there's circling of the numbers and all, so that there's an active thinking that is going on. And most of the time when they identify this correct information, they are more confident to write out the mathematical equation. And just a point to note, many of the students, yes, they do study the question carefully. They do sieve out all the important information, but we also like to encourage them to understand what is it that they have underlined. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have underlined less, then that's a minus question. Okay, so again, to train them to read with understanding, to really find out what is it that the question is asking for. So if you could at home, you know, if you were to do revision on problem sums, remind them as well that they have to look out and understand what they have circled or underlined. Okay, last but not least, there's an online learning portal that the school has subscribed to this year. It is actually the KOOBITS portal. May I please encourage and urge parents to get your girls to be on this platform, okay? Now, just to give you a simple overview, these are the features of the KOOBITS portal. So basically, the first one is a daily challenge. So encourage your girls to go on the portal daily. Okay, when they do that, there's actually consistency in their practice. And these questions are actually tailored to their own competencies. So as best as possible, get them to solve the questions on their own. All right. So do that, tell them to log in daily. There's also the mission function for them. And in this mission mode, students are free to do self-revision. So say, for example, they would like to revisit a topic that has been taught in January and they have forgotten about it. This is where you can let your children or your daughters revise that topic. Okay, and at times the math teachers will actually assign some tests or quizzes on the KOOBITS portal. Do encourage your girls to actually retrieve these assignments and try them out. Now, parents, this portal really is intended for the girls to build on their learning and really as best as can to be self-directed. So many a times I know at the young age, students require an adult supervision, but if you could train them to log in on their own and to try out the questions on their own, again, the fear is actually removed. And when they enjoy that subject, then, you know, it's really easy for them to receive knowledge and not be so fearful of math. Okay. So what I've gone through is actually a whole plethora of strategies that's been carried out in the math classrooms. And basically, all these strategies are actually intended to build on their confidence at a young age and really to get them to be, to take charge of their own learning. Okay, so we hope you have a better understanding of what happens in the classrooms. And Mrs. Goh will now go through how you can support your child at home. Mrs. Goh, please.
Thank you, Madam Rania. Yes, parents, how can you support your child from home? This is where you come in. And it is not just teacher and student. Remember earlier we talked about involvement. Education is involving children, teachers, and parents. And for here, we would like you to encourage your daughter when she's at home to explain how she solves the sums. It's in the explanation that she's using the mathematical language and vocabulary to articulate and clarify her thoughts. And 2 is to allow your daughter to make mistakes and give her time to struggle in finding the solutions. I know sometimes as parents, we are very anxious and very impatient when we see our daughters sitting beside us and getting the sums wrong, and we want to jump in quickly to rescue them. But in doing so, your child may end up learning from you that mistakes are bad. So perhaps you can suspend immediate judgment and maybe point out that, hey, I think in this page, maybe you have 2 correct. Can you find out which are the incorrect ones? So at least this allows her to take ownership to identify her own errors and correct them without feeling that she's wrong, you know. So be encouraging in the words that you use. And the next one, take a keen interest in your daughter's daily work rather than just the reviews or practice papers to assess her progress. Daily work is like little stepping stones to build her confidence and mastery. And don't wait till it's time for revision or for the end of term practice papers that you step in. By then, it will be too late. And next, encourage your daughters to be self-directed learners by taking charge of her own learning and tapping on the KOOBITS portal. This is to help her cultivate her interest in maths through KOOBIT exercises, and yet at the same time, be responsible for her own learning. Remember, we talked about consistency as being key. And maths is not just I learned and then I will forget. Maths is also about practicing consistently. With that, we want to say that it is not what you do for your children, but what you have taught them to do for themselves that will make them successful human beings. And your children look up to you. Do you sit with them just to be with them and see their struggles? Or is it you doing the sums for them and telling them, hey, you're wrong, you're wrong. All right, so be with them, show them your patience, show them your understanding, and show them that you understand the struggles that they have gone through. And you're also learning with them and from them. Remember, Madam Rania spoke about the STAR approach. So this is something that you might want to partner your child in to work together with her in using the STAR approach in problem solving. And last but not least, the quote, tell me and I'll forget. Teach me and I'll remember. Involve me and I'll learn. This means that when you tell your child something, sometimes they will not remember. Say, what do you say? Right? And if you teach, yes, then they will remember. But when you involve your child in her learning, bringing her to the supermarket, getting her to measure something at home, weighing items, involve her in the learning. And through touching, through real life experiences, she also learns. So we want to thank you very much for being here with us and spending this morning just before lunchtime to sit and listen and to understand the various assessments in the school.